All right, welcome back. Let's talk today about special products. So this is just a continuation of multiplying polynomials. And so just a reminder about the word polynomial is that we're multiplying two things together that have multiple terms. So we've talked about multiplying binomials together, which would be 2 terms times 2 terms. And in order to do that, you have to follow FOIL, first, outer, inner, last. So every term in the first set of parentheses has to get multiplied by everything in the second set of parentheses. Well, there are actually 3 types of special products. And they're called special products because they have some shortcuts that we can follow. But before we figure out the shortcuts, let's understand what each one is. So if you look at the first column, these are all the square of a sum. Because if you look, these are addition problems, and they're being squared. This column is called the square of a difference, because they're all subtraction problems, and they're being squared. And then we've got the differences of squares. So if you look at these problems, these are called a difference of squares because they look like they're being squared, but they're different. The signs are different, right? So we've got 4x minus 3 times 4x plus 3, and then 7x minus 10 times 7x plus 10. They have the same terms, except one of them has a subtraction and the other one has an addition sign. Now, a common mistake people make when they go to simplify a problem like this is that they bring in the 2 they square the 2x and then they square the 5, and they say the answer is 4x squared plus 25. Now that is completely incorrect. The reason that that's incorrect is because you can't do that when you've got an addition or a subtraction problem going on inside. It just doesn't work that way. It would only work if this was all one term, okay? So think about what this means. 2x plus 5 squared basically means that you're doing 2x plus 5 times another 2x plus 5, right? And so if you look at that, you've got a binomial times a binomial. So let's go ahead and go through and do FOIL with this. So I'm going to do 2x times 2x is 4x squared, and then 2x times 5 is plus 10x, and then 5 times 2x is another 10x, and then 5 times 5 is a positive 25. And then if you look, we've got like terms right here in the middle, which is then going to leave me with the answer 4x squared plus 20x plus 25. Now let's take a look at the next one. 3x, we're going over to the right. 3x minus 2 squared. You can't just bring in that 2 because it's a subtraction problem. So you have to think of it as, okay, I've got 3x minus 2 twice, right? 3x minus 2 squared means that I'm multiplying 3x minus 2 by itself. So again, we're going to do FOIL. 3x times 3x is 9x squared. And then 3x times negative 2 is negative 6x. And then negative 2 times 3x is another negative 6x, and then negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. And then right here in the middle, you have like terms. And so we're going to combine them, which is going to then leave me with 9x squared minus 12x plus 4. All right? Now the next one. It's already written out for us, so we're just going to go through and we're going to do FOIL. Okay? Again, this is called a difference of squares because it looks like both sets of parentheses are the same except one's addition and one's subtraction. So I'm going to do 4x times 4x is 16x squared, and then I'm going to do 4x times 3 is 12x, and I'm going to do negative 3 times 4 is negative 12x. Then I'm going to do negative 3 times positive 3 is negative 9. And then here, if you look at your middle terms, you've got like terms. Those guys cancel out. So then you're going to get 16x squared minus 9. And those are my answers. So now stop the video and finish the rest of these problems right here, and then see if you can answer the questions below. All right, now take a moment and look at these answers. And if you haven't actually gone through and done FOIL on all of them, you need to do that. Like, don't just write these answers down. There should be that middle step going on in here. So you should have these steps written down above these. I didn't do that because what I want you to do now is just look. We're going to be looking at these final answers. So check your answers. Maybe stop the video for a second, make sure you've got them all right. And now let's look at question number 1. It's asking, what do you notice about the first term in your simplified answers compared to the problem? So if you take a look, here this problem started with a 2x plus 5, and then the first term we got a 4x squared. And this one, we have 36x squared, and then look at the problem. What did this problem start with? It started with a 6x. And then here I have an x, and then I got an x squared. And then I have a 3x, and I got a 9x squared. Is that true in every single one of them? Did we square the first term? 3x becomes 9x squared. 5x became 25x squared. X became x squared. 7x became 49x squared. And it just keeps going. So here, we're squaring 11x. That's where that comes from. Here we were squaring x. Here we were squaring 7x. And here we were squaring 16x squared. So that very first question is that the first term in the problem is the first term in the answer squared. And now the second question, let's take a look at that. This next question is now, what do you notice about the last term? Well, the last term here is 25. And then, look, you had a 5. 5 squared is 25. Here, 2 squared is 4. 4 squared is 16. 7 squared is 49. Here, 2 squared is 4. 4 squared is 16. 8 squared is 64. 1 squared is 1. And it's true here. 9 and negative 9, you've got negative 81. But you're squaring, basically. Here, you get the 1 from 1 times negative 1. Here, you get the 10. Or 100 from 10 times negative 10, and here you get negative 9 because you're multiplying those together. So you're squaring the first term and you're squaring the last term to get your final answer. But now, if you notice, in the square of a sum and then in the square of a difference, we have middle terms. And these middle terms are the trickier part. So if you look at the middle terms, what do you notice about the middle terms here? Well, if you look, this middle term was 20x. What can I do to this problem to get 20x? And what can I do to this problem to get 24x? And what can I do to this to get 8x? Well, what you're doing is you're taking the two terms that are in the problem and you're multiplying together. So 2x times 5 is 10x. And then look, I'm doubling that to get 20x. And then I've got 6x times 2 is 12x. I'm doubling that to get 24. And then I've got x times 4, which is 4x, and then you're going to have two 4x's in the middle, and you're doubling it. So you basically just have to multiply these two numbers together and double it to get this. It's true over here as well for the square of a difference. If you look, you're multiplying your two terms together, and you're going to have two of those in the middle. And so that's what I got. So I multiply these two together, I double it, and I get this. Multiply these together and double it, and you get this. Multiply these together and double it, and you get this. And then with the square of a difference, the middle term is always going to be negative. In the square of a sum, it's always going to be positive. So now the last column, the differences of squares, what happens here? Well, we don't have a middle term. The middle term cancels out. Why does the middle term cancel out? Because you're multiplying together two things that end up giving you opposites. So in all of these, you had opposites. Your middle terms gave you opposites no matter what. And so the final answer, the middle term completely cancels out. So these are the only kind of problems where your middle term will cancel out. These, you always have a middle term. So hence, just again, you can't just bring these two, the exponent in and square everything, because in the square of a sum and the square of a difference, there is a middle term. All right, so now here are the answers to those three questions like we just discussed. Hopefully you've already written your own answers, but maybe just compare your answers with my answers and see if there's any place where you can be a little bit more clear in your explanation, or maybe you went further into your explanation than me, and that's a good idea. So the best bet here is this is your study guide, so you want to put good answers here, but here are some examples of what good answers would be. So stop the video, read this, and then move on. So now let's see if we can use the shortcut that we just discussed without actually doing FOIL. So I'm going to do the first column first. These, again, what are these all called? These are called the square of a sum because we are squaring a sum, right? All right, so when you square a sum, we're not just bringing in the little 2. You have to square the first term. So 4x squared is going to give us 16x squared. And then to get the middle term, it's like you're multiplying the 4x times the 1 together, those two terms, which gives us 4x. But we're going to have two 4x's in the middle, so that's going to give us 8x. So then we're going to have plus 8x, and then we square the last term. 1 squared is 1, so I get plus 1. All right, so the next one. 3x squared is 9x squared. And then you multiply 3x times 2 together, which is 6x, and then double it. So that gives us 12x. And then you square the 2. 2 squared is 4. The next one, x to the second power. Then I multiply x times 9 together, which is 9x, but I'm going to have 2 of those, which gives me 18x. And then 9 times 9 is 81. Basically, you do the same exact thing for the next column, which is the square of a difference, right? So we're going to square 4x, and it's going to be 16x squared. We're going to multiply 4x times negative 1, which is negative 4x, which is going to leave us with negative 8x in the middle. And then negative 1 squared is going to give us positive 1. The next one, 3x squared, is going to give us 9x squared. Then we multiply 3x and negative 2 together, gives us negative 6. Double it, it gives us negative 12x. Negative 2 squared is going to give us positive 4. Okay? The next one, square the x. So it's x squared. Multiply x times negative 9 gives us negative 9x, but we're going to double it. So we get negative 18x in the middle. Negative 9 times negative 9 is 81, so it's positive 81. So look, the two columns, the only difference between the two is that in the first column we've got a positive middle term, in the second column we've got a negative middle term. So now for the last column, this is called a difference of squares. It's a difference of squares because we've got the same terms in both sets of parentheses, except there's a positive and a negative. So for this, the middle terms are going to cancel out. So we just have to multiply 4x times 4x and negative 1 times 1. So this one is just going to give us 16x squared minus 1. So we get to ignore the outers and the inners because we know they're going to cancel out. So this next one, 3x times 3x is 9x squared. And 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Now the last one I do x times x is x squared. And then negative 9 times 9 is negative 81. All right, moving right along. Now this next little bit, we're still going to use the shortcut. These problems are just a little less straightforward. So I'll do the first row with you, and then I'll let you see if you can do the next row, the next couple rows on your own. So we're going to go ahead and take the 5x, and what do we do with it? We square it. Well, 5x squared is going to give us 25x squared. Now the middle term, I've got two variables going on. That's okay. 5x times 2y is going to give me 10xy. I double that and get 20xy. And then the last term, 2y to the second, is going to give us 4y squared. So I end up with plus 4y squared. Like that. Okay? Now notice when you do problems with multiple variables, the double variable thing is going to be in the middle. And then you've got the first thing, x squared at the beginning and y squared at the end. Okay? The next one, 6x squared. Well, that's 36x squared. And then multiply 6x and negative y together is negative 6xy. Double that. That's negative 12xy. And then we're going to square negative y squared. So that's going to give us positive y squared. Notice whenever you're squaring a negative term, it's going to be addition there at the end. The next column is a difference of squares. So all I have to do is multiply my first terms and my last terms together. That's it, because the middle, the outers and the inners are going to cancel out. So 4x times 4x is 16x squared. And then negative 3y times 3y is negative 9y squared. Now stop the video and do the next ones on your own and then tune back in to see if you got them right. All right, now go ahead and take a look at these answers. Notice that when you've got one with, let's say, the x to the third plus 6 squared, notice that the middle term, x to the third, stays x to the third because you're not squaring that x to the third in the middle, right? So let's just walk you through this one real fast. You square that, that's x to the third times x to the third, which is x to the 6th. This gives you 6x to the third when you multiply it, but then you double it and you get 12x to the third. And then you square the last term to get 36. If at any point you have any questions about any of these, then stop the video and come get help. All right, another thing to point out is these two right here. Typically this, when we write our answer, would go at the beginning and our constants would go at the end. This would go at the beginning and our constant would go at the end. But we're following the order here, it ends up looking like this. But typically it would go this term, and this term, okay? Now, you're basically going to finish the rest of the sheet on your own. I wanted to just give you some helpful hints on how to do this. So what I'm asking you to do here is I'm asking you to give me your own example of a square of a sum. Not one that you've already done. Come up with your own numbers in here. Your own example of this and your own example of difference of squares as well. And then I want you to give the answer. So you're doing an example, give the answer, and then explain in words how you're getting each term of the answer. So you might want to say first term and then write what you did. Second term, write what you did. Third term, write what you did. So here you're using words, okay? No numbers or letters, like using words. No numbers or variables is what I meant. Use the words. Here you're coming up with your own example and doing it. And so as soon as you finish this whole sheet, then you can start your homework. Good luck.